is the one I was saying I was going to do second. So this one is pretty straightforward, but what we're going to do is generate a random number, and we're going to track how many times it takes the user to guess this number. And so what I'm going to do is zoom in a bit here so that we can see our code. The first thing I'm going to do is import this module in Python called random. All right, so first thing to mention here is that this right here is what's known as a module. So when you import random, you're importing the random module. Now this just lets you use all of the functionality that's kind of in here. This is default. This is installed with Python by default. You don't need to install it or anything like that. And quick note, there is modules that are built by, people like me or other developers out there, and you can import them, but you have to install them first. This one is just built into Python by default, and so no installation is required. Anyways, let me show you how to make a random number. So there's a few different ways to do this, but the two simplest ways are to do random dot and then rand range. And then you're going to do an open and closing parenthesis. And let me get rid of the print statement so we can see this better for right now. And here, you're going to put the start and then the stop of the range for your random number. So you would do something like -1 if you wanted to start the range at -1 and stop at 10. Excuse me. And then what this would do is generate a random number that goes from -1 to 10, but does not include 10. So that's very important. The number you put here is the absolute upper bound. You cannot have the number 10 be generated if 10 is here. If you wanted the range to generate a number between -1 and 10, you would have to put 11. Again, I don't know why they do that. There's just some things in Python that aren't necessarily intuitive for beginners, but with this is 11, it's not going to generate 11. It will generate up to 10. So make sure that's clear. Now, there's another thing you can do here. If you want the range to just start at 0, you can say random.randRange and just put the stop. If you just put one thing here, what this will do is generate a random number between 0 and this number -1, so up to 10. And yeah, there you go. That's how that works. Okay, so let's do something from -5 to 11. And let's say r is equal to random.randRange. And let's just print r. Okay, so let me run this. And we'll look at our thing here. Okay, run. And notice we get a 5. Now, if I run this again, we're getting a -3. I run a bunch of times, we get a bunch of random numbers. You see, this is random. And there you go. That's working. We got a 9. We can just run a bunch of times. We got a 10. Notice we won't get 11 if we do this. Sweet. So we're getting a random number. So that's one way. Another way to do this is with a function called randint. Now, randint works the exact same way as randrange, except now it will include 11. So the upper bound range now includes the number that you typed, doesn't go up to but not included. So now if I do -5 to 11, 11 will possibly be generated. So if I run this now, we get 6, right? And if we keep running it, we might see that we get 11. Okay, I'm not, this could take a while. Yeah, there you go. So we do get 11, so that works. Okay, sweet. And same thing here. If you decide to not include the start, it will just generate up to and including this end number that you put right here. So that's how you make a random number. So what we want to do is generate a random number. So actually, let's leave this here. Let's say random underscore number. And then we want to ask the user to guess this number. And every single time they guess it, we're going to tell them if they were above or below the number so that they can do it in like a reasonable number of guesses, especially if we make this number like really large, right? So the first thing I'm going to actually ask the user is how large of a number they want to generate. So we'll assume it starts at 0, and then we'll ask them to type in a number, and we'll generate up to that number. So I'm going to say, let's say top of range is equal to, and then input, and we'll say type a number. We won't even tell them what it's for. We'll just say type a number. Okay, so now they're going to type a number. So what we actually need to do here is we need to make sure that this thing they typed in here is a number. Because if the user types in like hello or Tim or some random string, something that's not a number, then we can't use that, right? And we also need to make sure the number they type in is greater than 0. So I'll show you how we do that. I'm going to say if the top of range dot is digit, okay? And then I'm going to do an if statement inside of this if statement. I'm going to say if the int, and actually we're going to do this. We're going to say top of range is equal to int top of range. And let me pause here and explain what I'm doing. So first of all, you can make a variable using underscores. When you want to have multiple words, it makes a lot of sense to make the name with underscores. So like top underscore of underscore range. You can't have a variable that's like top range. That won't work. You need to have it connected. You can't have like two separate words like that. Anyways, this is equal to input. The user is going to type something in. Now, by default, when the user types something in, it's going to return it to us with double quotation marks. So it's going to be a string. So even if the user types in like 25, it's going to be returned to us like this. And this here for Python is not considered a number. It's not considered an integer. It's considered a string. And so we need to convert this 25 so that it looks like this, so that it's actually a number. And the way you do that is you use this function called int. So you surround the string with int, and then it will convert this string into its numeric representation, so it will give us 25. However, if you try to convert something that's not an actual integer into an int, it's going to fail. You're going to get an error. And so we need to make sure that what the user typed in is a digit before we try to convert it into an int. And the way you check that is with this isDigit method. So I say if topofrange.isDigit, what isDigit will do is return to us true if this is a number, otherwise it will return false. And so if this right here is true, we will convert top of range into an integer. So top of range is equal to int top of range. Then we will check if top of range is greater than 0. So we'll say if top of range is, actually we're going to say less than 0, less than or equal to 0 specifically, then what we will do is we'll print out, please type a number larger than 0 next time, and then we'll just quit. So we'll tell them what they did wrong, and then we're just going to quit the program right there. Otherwise, if we make it through all of this, we're good. But one thing we need to do here is we need to put an else, and we need to put quit, and we need to put a print statement that says, please type a number next time. So let me run through this. What we're doing is checking if it is a digit. If it's not a digit, so in the else statement, we need to tell them, hey, you got to type in a digit. This doesn't work if you don't type in a number, right? And then we quit. Now, if that works, if it is a digit, we convert it into an int. We make sure it's greater than 0. If it isn't, then we tell them, hey, you got to type in a number, and then we quit. But if we make it through all of this and we don't quit, so we've now converted the number to an int, we can now use that number to generate our random number. So we can say random number, random.randint, and then we can put top of range as our variable for generating that random number, and we'll now generate up to whatever number they typed in. Sweet. So now that we have that, let's just print out the random number, and let's just test this and make sure it's all working. So I'm going to run this, type a number, let's type 5, and we got one issue, randint missing one potential argument, b. Okay, so this is my fault. I was saying when we used randint, we could just include the top of the range. That's false. We need to include the bottom of the range as well. So I'm going to put 0 there, and now this should work. So let's run this, and let's type a number. Let's type 5, and there you go. We generated a random number, which was 4. If we run this again, type 5, we get 3. You can see this is indeed working. Sweet. So now that we have our random number, we want to keep asking the user to type in a guess for the number until they get it correct. And so I'm going to use a while loop here, and I'll explain how this works in a second. I'm just going to say while true. Now, what this means is, okay, we're going to do whatever is indented after this while loop here, after the colon, while this condition, whatever's at the top of here, is true. So right now, if we just decided to like print Tim, this would happen infinitely. This loop would never stop unless we actually like manually close the program. The reason is because there's no way for this to end, right? I say while true, well, true is always true, and so we're just always going to print 10. However, there is this keyword, it's called break, and what break will do is immediately stop the loop as soon as this line of code is executed. So what we can do is use this break keyword to break out of the loop, stop running the loop as soon as the user types in the correct number. So we're going to say while true. This is the condition for the while loop. We could do a real condition. We could say something like while like input, and actually we'll say like user guess is not equal to random number. We could do something like that. That would work as well. But I want to show you using the break keyword. So instead we're going to do while true. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by asking the user to guess what the number is, right? That's the very first thing we do every single time we ask them. We say, okay, make a guess. So I'm going to say user underscore guess is equal to, and then input. I'm going to say make a guess, colon. Now, same thing here. We need to check if the user's guess is actually an integer, right? And so I'm going to copy exactly what we just did right here. And I'm going to paste it down below. And I'm going to say, okay, if the, and now instead of saying top of range, I'm going to say user underscore guess dot is digit, then user underscore guess is equal to int of user underscore guess. And then I'll even take this. And we don't need to check if the number is less than 0. That's fine. We can just do this. So I'm going to say, and I'm going to get rid of this quit. Okay, let me explain this. But what I'm saying is, okay, the user guess is equal to input make a guess. They're going to type in some number. This comes in as a string. We need to make sure that what they've typed in is actually a number. If it is a number, we'll convert it to a number. We're all good. However, if it is not a number, then we're going to say, please type a number next time. And we're going to use this keyword called continue. Now, what continue will do is automatically bring us back to the top of our loop. So it's a little bit different than break. Rather than ending the loop, it just brings us back to the very top. So if I did something down here like printed after continue, if we hit this continue keyword, this won't run. We won't print. We'll just go back up to the top of the loop and ask the user to make another guess. And so that's what we're going to do. However, we're going to come down here now. We're going to say if the user guess is equal to the random number, we're going to print, and we're going to say you got it. You got it correct. Otherwise, we'll say else print you got it wrong. So if they didn't get it right, they got it wrong, obviously, right? Whereas if they didn't type a number, we'll just say, please type a number next time, and then we'll continue rather than doing this and telling them they got it wrong after they didn't even type a number in. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. We can test this out, though, and make sure it's working. So save the program and run. Now type a number. Let's type a number, let's say 10. Okay, make a guess. We're going to guess 3. And wow, okay, we actually got it. That's great. But notice that it's still asking us to keep making guesses. And to quit this, you can type Control-C on your keyboard if you get into an infinite loop. The reason it's telling us to do that is because we didn't break out of the while loop, right? We said you got it, but we didn't stop. And to stop, we need to use the break keyword. So now you'll see if we do guess it, we'll immediately stop looping. Whereas if we don't get it, we will continue looping because the break keyword's not here. So let's run this now. Type a number. Let's just go up to 5. Make a guess. 1, you got it wrong. Okay, we'll guess 2, you got it wrong. 3, you got it wrong. 4, you got it wrong. 5, you got it. Sweet. And then we exit the loop. There you go. Okay, so that's working fine. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to keep track of how many times the user actually makes a guess. So to do this, I'm going to make a variable similar to what we had with score before. I'm going to say guesses is equal to 0. And now every single time we start this while loop again, I'm going to increment add 1 to guesses. So I'm going to say guesses plus equals 1. So at the very top of the loop, we'll increment guesses. So the first time this runs, guesses will be equal to 1. We'll go through all of this. Then we'll come back up to the top. Guesses will now be equal to 2. The user will now make another guess. And now when we exit this while loop, once this is done, we're going to print out how many guesses they got. I'm going to show you a different way to do this time. I'm going to say you got it in, and then we'll say comma, guesses, and then the string guesses. So another way to print multiple things on the same line is to use commas. So I'm going to say you got it in, and then I'm going to say whatever the number of guesses is. Notice I don't need a space here. Whenever you have commas separating your different things that you're printing out, it will automatically add spaces in between them. And then notice here I didn't even convert this to a string. And that's because the print statement is smart enough to say, okay, hey, this is an int. I'm going to convert this into a string for you and kind of automatically add it to this string. So what we were doing manually before, the print statement can just do for us. And so this time we'll let the print statement do it. This line here is completely equivalent to just having the plus, the space, the string, the other plus, and the space, right? It's the exact same thing. Okay, so let's go back to what we had. And there you go. We are all good. Now, let's just run this, and I am going to show you how we can tell them if they got it greater than or less than, because I did tell you that we were going to do that. Okay, so let's run this, and let's say type a number. Let's go 5, make a guess. 1, you got it wrong. 2, you got it. And then it says you got it in 2 guesses. Sweet, all is working. So now the last thing we want to do is tell the user if they were greater than or less than the number so that they can kind of narrow down their guesses. And so rather than just telling them you got it wrong, now inside of the else statement, we're going to check if the user was above or if they were below. And there's a ton of different ways to do this. I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to say if the user guess is greater than the random number, then what I want to do is say print you were above the number. Exclamation point. Otherwise, I'm going to say print, and I'll say you were below the number. All right, so let's run through this. We're just checking if the user guess is greater than whatever the random number is. If it is, we're going to tell them they were above the number. Otherwise, if it wasn't greater than, it must be less than, and we're going to say you were below the number. Now, some of you may have heard that statement, if it wasn't greater than, it must be less than. You say, no, it could be equal to. That's correct. But the thing is, up here, we checked if it was equal to. And so if it was equal to, we would have gone into here. We would not have hit this else statement. So if we're in this else statement, we know we must not be equal to the random number. And so instead, what we can do is just run this if statement that's inside of the else. I'm going to show you a more elegant way to do this in 1 second, but let's just run the program and see if this works now. Okay, let's run this. Type a number. Let's type 20. Make a guess. Let's guess 10. You were above the number. Okay, so now I don't have to guess below 10. So I'm going to guess 5. You were above the number. Okay, it's less than 5. 4, 3, 2, 1. You got it in 9 guesses. Okay, so anyways, that did work, but it was telling us whether we were above or below. Let's see if I can guess something that's actually, I guess I couldn't have guessed anything below 1. So let's run this again. Let's type 10. Let's guess 1. And then this time it is telling us we're below the number. Okay, great. So that is working. Okay, so the one thing I want to show you here is how we can clean this up a little bit using something new that we haven't seen yet, which is known as an elif statement. So an elif statement is something that kind of happens after the initial if statement is checked. So I'm just going to type this out, and then I'll show you how this works. So I'm going to say elif. Okay, so now what I've done is I've made this code a little bit cleaner. And the way I've done this is I've removed that kind of nested if statement that we had, and I've now implemented an elif instead. So what the elif does is if the initial condition is not true, it will then check another condition. So it says, okay, if this is true, we're going to do this. We're going to skip all of this. If this is not true, we're going to check this. If this is true, we're going to do this, and we're going to skip whatever else is after it. However, if this is not true, then we're going to do whatever is in the else. So we're going to check this. If it's true, we do this. Otherwise, we check this. If it's true, we do this. And otherwise, if both of these things are false, we do what's in the else. And so that's just another way to do this rather than having what we had before, which was the else, and then all of this kind of indented in the else, right? This just cleans it up. And small note, you can have as many elif statements as you want. So I could add another one like this if I wanted to do that. But in our case, it doesn't really make any sense to do that. Okay, so that's actually it. I'm not going to run the program. Just believe me, this does work. And yeah, that is going to be our number guessing game. So I'll zoom out a bit so you guys can kind of see all of the code. But that is